Hi there, could I get one of your Auchroisks, a Bruichladdich and a Bunnahabhain?
I think he means, can you have an Auchroisk, a Bruichladdich and a Bunnahabhain, please?
Okay.
If you've ever felt embarrassed ordering a whiskey because you're not sure how to pronounce it, don't worry, you're not alone.
Today we're going to teach you how to pronounce 10 of the trickiest whiskey names like a true Scotsman.
And stick around until the end where we'll share the one whiskey that even Scottish people argue about.
Welcome to Still Spirit, everyone. Before we get started, let us know in the comments, which whiskey do you find the trickiest to pronounce?
Now there's a fascinating reason why these names are so tricky to pronounce. Most of them come from Scottish Gaelic, a language that dates back over 1,500 years.
In fact, when many of these distilleries were founded in the 1800s, Scottish Gaelic was still widely spoken in the Highlands and Islands. The founders named their distilleries after local landmarks, rivers and valleys.
We'll break each name down syllable by syllable, and we'll also share the meaning behind each name, because everyone tells a story. In the 1800s, many distillery founders deliberately chose Gaelic names for their whiskies. They wanted to emphasise the Scottish heritage of their product, especially when selling to the English and international markets. It was basically 19th century marketing.
And it worked. These exotic sounding names helped create an aura of mystery and authenticity that still influences whiskey marketing today.
Let's start with one of the trickiest, which is Bunnahabhain.
Most people say Bunnahabhain, but it's actually Bunnahabhain. The B and H together actually make a V sound.
This Islay distillery's name means mouth of the river in Gaelic.
Bunnahabhain sits in the northeastern coast of Islay, facing the Sound of Islay and the Isle of Jura. It's actually the most northerly of all Islay distilleries, tucked away in a beautiful remote bay.
When this distillery was founded in 1881, they had to build not just a distillery, but an entire village to house their workers. There wasn't anything here except a natural harbour and pure spring water.
Even today, it's one of the most remote distilleries in Scotland. The single-track road that leads to Bunnahabhain is one of the most dramatic drives in whiskey making, all winding corners and coastal views.
Next up is Bruichladdich. This one trips everyone up.
Despite the spelling, the pronunciation is quite simple. It's Bruichladdich. It's very common in Scotch dialect for CH to be pronounced like loch. Bruichladdich sits on the western shore of Islay on what's called the Rins Peninsula. Unlike most Islay distilleries, it actually faces away from the other islands, looking out towards the Atlantic Ocean.
When Bruichladdich reopened in 2001 after being closed for years, they discovered Victorian-era equipment that was still in perfect working order. They still use their original 1881 open-topped mash tun today. Here's one that looks simple, but it isn't. It's Caol Ila.
We've heard many variations of pronunciation for this, but as Kelly says, the correct pronunciation is Caol Ila.
This means Sound of Islay in Gaelic. It's named after the strait between Islay and Jura.
Caol Ila sits overlooking the Sound of Islay with spectacular views. From the still house windows, you can actually see the fierce tidal waters, and on a clear day, you might spot deer swimming on the Islay coast.
The distillery was built in 1846, deliberately positioned here to make it easier to ship supplies and whiskey by boat, much more practical than using the rough tracks that passed for roads back then.
Now here's one everyone knows, but many say wrong, Glenfiddich.
It's not Glenfiddich and it's not Glenfiddich, it's Glenfiddich.
Glen means valley and Fiddich means deer, so it translates to Valley of the Deer.
Glenfiddich sits in Dufton, right in the heart of Speyside. The valley it is named after is still home to wild deer today, and if you visit early in the morning, you might see them grazing near the distillery.
When William Grant built this distillery in 1886, he literally did it with his own hands, along with his 9 children and a single stonemason. Today, it's one of the world's best-selling single malt whiskies.
So next we have Auchentoshan. This one is a real tongue twister.
It's pronounced Auchentoshan. There are many videos out there that suggest Auchentoshan, but as we said earlier, just remember the CH in Scotch dialect is often pronounced so Auchentoshan.
Auchentoshan is unique among our distilleries today because it's a lowland distillery sitting just outside Glasgow. The name means corner of the field in Gaelic, and it's been making whiskey here since 1823.
It's one of the few Scottish distilleries that triple distills every drop of whiskey it makes, a practice more common in Ireland than in Scotland. Here's one that even whisky lovers often get wrong. Dailuaine.
It's pronounced Dailuaine, and it's one of my favourites because my granda used to work there.
This one means green valley in Gaelic, and when you see its location, you'll understand why.
Dailuaine is tucked away in a lush green valley beside the River Spey. It was founded in 1852 by William Mackenzie, and the distillery was actually built right next to a railway line. Very modern for its time. Now, here's one that really ties people's tongues in knots. It's Craigellachie.
Most people try Craigellachie, but as Kelly says, the pronunciation is Craigellachie.
The name means rocky hill in Gaelic.
Craigellachie sits right in the heart of the Speyside region. It's actually the meeting point of two of Scotland's most famous whisky rivers, the Spey and the Fiddich.
Built in 1891, it's also right next to the famous Telford Bridge. If you've ever driven through Speyside looking for distilleries, you've probably seen it.
Okay, here's one that people get wrong all the time, including me. I think I get it wrong quite often. It's Glenmorangie.
It's not Glenmorangie, like most people say, it's Glenmorangie.
Yeah, the emphasis is on the more, so a good reminder is Morangie sounds like orangey.
Glenmorangie sits on the shores of the Dornoch Firth in the Northern Highlands. The name means Valley of Tranquility in Gaelic, and it's an incredibly peaceful spot.
Yeah, the distillery is famous for having the tallest stills in Scotland. They're as tall as a fully grown adult giraffe. That's why often Glenmorangie show giraffes on their branding.
So here's one that catches many people out. It's Ledaig.
It's not Ledaig or Ledaig. As Kelly says, the pronunciation is Ledaig.
The name means safe haven in Gaelic, referring to the protected harbour of Tobermory on the Isle of Mull where the distillery sits.
Ledaig isn't actually a distillery name, it's a brand made by Tobermory Distillery. When they make peated whisky, they call it Ledaig, and when it's unpeated, it's named Tobermory.
The distillery dates back to 1798, making it one of Scotland's oldest commercial distilleries. Here's one that really tests people, Auchroisk.
Most people try Auchroisk, but as Kelly says, pronunciation is Auchroisk.
The name comes from Gaelic, ford of the Red Stream, referring to the redstone bed of the burn that provides the distillery's water.
This is one of Speyside's younger distilleries, with production only starting in 1974. It was actually built by Justerini and Brooks to provide malt whisky for their J&B blends.
Interestingly, they originally released it as a single malt called the Singleton because they thought Auchroisk would be too difficult for people to pronounce.
And even today, most of Auchroisk still goes into blends, particularly J&B. When you find it as a single malt, it's known for its light, fruity character, typical of this part of Speyside.
And now for the name that even Scottish people debate about, Laphroaig.
You'll hear Laphroaig, Laphroaig, and many other mispronunciations, so much so that Laphroaig have now actually added the pronunciation on the whisky label.
The distillery officially says Laphroaig, but you'll still hear plenty of debate about this one.
Laphroaig sits on the same stretch of Islay coast as Lagavulin, and the name means the beautiful hollow by the broad bay in Gaelic, although even that's debated. So these were examples of some of Scotland's hardest to pronounce whiskies. Now, even within Scotland, you might still hear variations in how these names are pronounced.
That's right, a Highlander might pronounce their words slightly differently from someone from Glasgow. Both are technically correct. Scotland has an unusually rich amount of accents for such a small nation.
Some distilleries have started creating pronunciation guides for their staff because these questions are so common.
And a few have even changed their marketing to include pronunciation guides on their bottles, like Laphroaig, for example.
For our hardcore whisky fans, here's an extra challenge. Try pronouncing these distillery names that didn't make our main list. Auchentoshan,
Glenglassaugh,
Glengeary,
Clynelish,
Glentochers,
and Ardnamurchan. Remember, even if you don't get it perfectly right, most bartenders will know what you mean.
but now you can order these whiskies with confidence.
Now that you know how to pronounce these distillery names, you might be wondering where exactly they all are.
We've created a complete guide to all of Scotland's whisky regions right here, where we explore what makes each area special and also recommended our favourite drams from each region. We'll see you there.